Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to join with you today. Can I acknowledge Dr. Adam Thomason, the Director of the Australian Institute of Criminology, and Mr. Nilo Marino, the co-chair of the Victorian Safe Communities Network, and conference attendees as well, one and all. I'd also like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners of the land on which we're meeting today, and pay my respects to all Aboriginal folks that are here with us. As has been indicated, I am the Commissioner of Police in New South Wales, but that's not the reason for my being here today. Today I speak with you as a representative of ANSPAR, the Australian New Zealand Policing Advisory Agency. ANSPAR, as we know it, is a joint initiative of the Australian and New Zealand Police Ministers and Commissioners. It was established in 2007 to provide policy and research advice on cross-jurisdictional policing initiatives to help achieve excellence in Australian and New Zealand policing. So I then speak on behalf of all commissioners in Australia and New Zealand. I'm certainly grateful for that opportunity. I've been asked to talk to you about alcohol misuse, and it's something that certainly is very close to my heart in the role that I perform. Alcohol, or more particularly the misuse and the abuse of alcohol, is one of the principal problems in society. It is the principal problem for police. Let that sink in. It is the principal problem for police. No other substance or issue occupies more police time, is more difficult for police to manage, involves police in more grief and trauma, and puts police in the way of physical harm more than alcohol when it is misused, and the consequences that flow from that misuse. Assaults, affray, traffic accidents, domestic violence, harassment, break and enter, suicide and self-harm. All too often, these can be traced to the misuse of alcohol, and it doesn't stop there. The misuse of alcohol has a myriad of other adverse effects on individual health, on family life, on employment, and ultimately on community spirit and amenity. The list is extensive, and they're just a few of the examples, but I'm sure you all know plenty of others. The other thing you know is that alcohol-related harm is directly related to how much alcohol is consumed. There is, as the health professionals like to say, a dose-response relationship. The more you drink, the worse you get. And the sooner you start drinking, the more harm is done. It's pretty easy, isn't it? It sort of sounds sensible. For that reason alone, alcohol consumption by our young people deserve the most serious attention. It's imperative through the right sort of interventions that alcohol misuse is curbed and alcohol-related harm, including alcohol-related crime, which you'll hear me talk about a lot, is averted. There is absolute consensus across police jurisdictions on this point. We speak as one, as commissioners, in this area. It is a strategic priority of ANSPAR to address alcohol misuse, and ANSPAR has developed an alcohol misuse strategy, 2010-2012, which aims to improve community safety through promoting individual and social responsibility in the consumption of alcohol. I'm going to come to the components of that strategy, but first I just want to take a few moments to describe the situation as I see it. Alcohol, I think, is viewed by the community at large as a commodity, not as a drug. It's a product that is purchased, a bit like milk. When you buy milk or when you buy bread, alcohol just seems to be on the shopping list. Alcohol consumption is firmly entrenched in the Australian and the New Zealand cultures. And while alcohol is often used to celebrate and to commemorate occasions with families and with friends, the level and misuse of alcohol has reached, I think, the tipping point. That is, changing the nature and the very fabric of our community. It's adversely affecting community amenity and resulting in detrimental impacts on the community's health and well-being. Already, I've heard today that you've been looking at this over the course of the last day and a half, or day and this morning. There is nothing new in what I'm saying, but you need to hear it from me as I represent a group of professionals that have to deal with these problems day in and day out. I emphasise community when I said it impacts on communities' health and well-being, because the scale and the impact of alcohol consumption, particularly in public places, has extended beyond one, two, or even a few drunk individuals, if only it were that easy. The culture of a laid-back, have a beer with your mate, has given way to a different and certainly a more harmful and an increasingly pervasive drinking culture, particularly for young people. It's the culture of drink to get drunk. Drink until you drop, until you're legless and you can't take any more. And I can see people acknowledging that in the crowd. Now, that's the reality. Converge on venues preloaded. Get drunk almost before you get there. Backload, another term. And then boast about your drunken behaviour the next day on Twitter or Facebook. What you did in the early hours of the morning, if you can remember. Something's changed, but what exactly? And why? What's changed? Ponder those questions, because it goes right to the heart of why most of us are here, I'm sure. If we want to intervene constructively to reduce the harm caused by alcohol misuse, then we need to know what it is that's causing the change in the drinking culture. And to intervene effectively, we need to know the causes with some precision. Because if we don't, to bring a blunt instrument to try and resolve these sorts of issues will in fact be counterproductive. I spoke at the outset about the magnitude of the problem of alcohol misuse for police, describing it as the problem. And that wasn't just hyperbole. There's ample confirmation in the data, some of which I'm sure you will be familiar with. Let me just touch on a few things. We know that the rate of physical and verbal abuse perpetrated by someone intoxicated by alcohol is more than twice that perpetrated by people intoxicated by other commonly used drugs. That's violence. The cost to policing across Australia from alcohol-related crime alone in 2004. Now, this is just the cost to policing, not to anyone else, and I think this is underdone. In 2004 was estimated at about $750 million for the year. We know that violence clusters around licensed premises. For example, if we take the New South Wales experience, last week, Don Weatherburn, who I'm sure many of you would know in this crowd, Don Weatherburn released the most recent statistics. And he said more than half of the assaults in the Sydney Central Business District take place within 50 metres of a liquor outlet. Now that means something. And my fellow commissioners tell me that this pattern of violence is reflected in their own capital cities. It's the same here as it is in Darwin, Perth, Brisbane and Sydney. We also know that the harmful use of alcohol results in the death of about 2.5 million people across the world every year. It causes illnesses and injuries to many more, and increasingly affects the younger generations and drinkers in developing countries. And that's without even going into some of the more complicated medical conditions that arise from the misuse or the abuse of alcohol. But there's one area that I really want to talk to you about with some authority, and that's the toll on police. I know that the best. I know what the gravity of that issue is perhaps best brought home to me as a commissioner in that area. I know it because I and my colleagues across Australia see it, we deal with it 7 days a week. Get this figure into your head. 70% of police time on the streets of New South Wales is devoted to dealing with the consequences of alcohol-related crime, whether it's dealing with a victim, a witness, or an offender. In fact, it's more than 70%, but we'd be happy if that could register just 70%. In fact, last year it was about 74%. That's a lot of time. That involves a lot of police. Violent altercations with people intoxicated with alcohol are commonplace. Broken jaws, noses, hands, bruises, lacerations, stitches and concussion are the scars that police have to take away from those battles that they fight each and every day. On the part of the inebriated, it's not a battle engaged in to uphold any principle, or noble or otherwise. It's a battle beyond reason, mindless, pointless, very destructive. Drivers continue to return above legal limit alcohol readings. Fatal car accidents involving alcohol continue to occur and present police and emergency service workers with traumatic experiences, recovering bodies, sometimes parts of bodies, and dealing with the grief-stricken friends and relatives of those that have died. Some of those workers never ever recover. Their careers, their professional careers, are cut short significantly. So that's just a few of the issues that we deal with as professionals. The big question is, how do we address the problem? Now, police commissioners believe the response required needs to go beyond a whole of government, and it was wonderful to have the Minister here talking about it, but we think the problem is much bigger than that. It's got to go beyond governments. It's past a whole of government response. It's got to be a whole of community response. In the same way, the community finally said, we've had enough. They stood up and said no to drink driving, no to domestic violence. Saying no to the misuse of alcohol has got to be the next cultural shift that we require as a nation. Police, government, health, education, non-government groups and the wider community must all look at new and innovative ways to engage the community, to inform them about the risks and the harms of alcohol misuse. And only then will the message that enough really is enough take root, and we will initiate the type of cultural shift that we can see has occurred with drink driving or the wearing of seatbelts. Wearing of seatbelts, a fantastically effective program. Just as it's now okay to take the keys, your car keys off a mate who's had too much to drink, it's got to become the norm to tell a mate to slow down, ease up, or, as a recent summer cricket campaign stated, know when to declare. And that's what ANSPA and the alcohol misuse strategy aims to achieve, a change in this thinking, this cultural thinking, which will ultimately change the way people consume alcohol and hopefully the way they behave. Now, this alcohol misuse strategy that I've talked about, two components, action and advocacy. Action refers in the main to the coordinated law enforcement strategies that can and are being applied to combat alcohol misuse. While these strategies squarely fall within police's traditional domain, they can and they do benefit from the support of other parties, and you're going to see an example of that shortly. Advocacy refers to measures police undertake in conjunction with or on behalf of others in government and outside to address the causes and the consequences of alcohol misuse. We advocate by lending our ideas, experience, energy, our support and resources in what we insist needs to be a common endeavour. Police are not social workers. We're not healthcare workers. We're not psychologists. But we do understand the need and the place for preventive programs, as we've already talked about this morning. And we will work cooperatively on a range of programs designed to prevent alcohol misuse from occurring in the first place. That's our primary aim. Because if we can get strategic and get some real prevention onto the scene, then we're going to reduce the number of victims that we're having to deal with downstream. Really important. This misuse strategy that I've talked about from ANSPA seeks to improve intelligence and information sharing, to better inform operational policing strategies to reduce alcohol-related harms, to improve coordination of Australia and New Zealand alcohol misuse campaigns, to further develop strategic partnerships and operational approaches, to identify productive opportunities for further research and development, and to encourage collective action to improve the impact and influence of work undertaken. The most visible outcome of the strategy to this point has been an operation that we know across Australia as Operation Unite. Some of you may have heard of Operation Unite. This operation was first run in December of 2009. It's been repeated with some variation twice since then in 2010. As the name might suggest, Operation Unite reflects the united effort and the determination of police forces to act collectively and to deliver the same consistent message that alcohol-related crime, violence and antisocial behaviour is simply not acceptable. It's a message as much to the rest of the community as it is to the perpetrators. Unite was and is a statement of intent. We talk about it as commissioners as the line in the sand.